Baseball expansion and realignment has been a hot topic lately, and let's discuss how it could impact the White Sox on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fanside Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred recently floated the idea of MLB expansion and realignment that will naturally come with it. Let's discuss how that could potentially impact the White Sox. Then let's discuss if the White Sox can catch the Twins in the standings next season. And finally, let's discuss Miguel Vargas being considered the sixth most improved player in baseball. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters Tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. All right, so Rob Manfred hinted this past Sunday about MLB expansion, and really what it is just at least him acknowledging out loud that it's probably going to happen. You know, we're all speculating. It's been speculated for the past, probably 2 years that MLB will eventually expand, especially if the lockout after next season is as messy as everyone's envisioning. Baseball is going to need those expansion fees. I believe the estimation would be like, I think a $2 billion expansion fee, maybe even $3 billion. And for the record, I still don't think the MLB lockout is going to be as messy as everybody's thinking. Like, I've seen predictions of, there's not even going to be baseball in 2027. I think it's going to be somewhat like 2020 where the money is just too much for them to be like, oh, we're not playing at all because we need a salary cap. I think what's going to happen is you're probably going to get a lower competitive balance tax that the owners will probably compromise to just so that they can get a contract in place. So in that way they can negotiate the local TV deals that obviously Manfred wants to put all into one house. But expansion will affect the White Sox in that it at least will keep the dark cloud of that possible relocation actually off the radar for a little bit. I think it's going to move that speculation that, hey, the White Sox could potentially move, because how Jerry took that meeting with the Nashville mayor during the winter meetings 2 years ago. And you had this narrative when Dan Bernstein whizzed with 670 the score that, they're going to be sold and sent to Nashville. Now, I still think it's always a possibility, but I don't see Justin Ishbia building this huge compound in Wilmette and then eventually buying the White Sox and be like, yep, I'm pulling up and moving out to, Charlotte. Because that's, again, why it puts it off the radar is I think a lot of these cities will focus on making sure that they get an expansion team. And the speculation has made it clear. There are going to be probably, 3 cities in the running. Nashville probably will definitely get a team. I mean, it makes sense in that you probably want to add one more team to the South. It's a booming metropolis. The population is growing. It's a good tourist city. And as you've seen, MLB is wanting to expand, obviously, into Vegas with the Athletics going there. And then to balance it out, it's probably going to be out west, and it's either going to be Portland or Salt Lake. So what you only have to worry about in terms of that relocation leverage that Jerry may still play during the next 4 years that he potentially owns a team, or, hey, Justin Ishbia, like I said, it's a possibility. If he wants some more public dollars for a new stadium that he should privately finance, but there's nothing wrong with asking for some infrastructure money. You just have to worry about the loser between Portland and Salt Lake. Because, again, I just don't see Major League Baseball allowing another Southern team outside of Nashville to eat into the Braves market. I mean, you got to remember the Braves are kind of a legacy franchise in that they're a national brand with all those years of being on TBS. So I think you can rule out Charlotte or Raleigh poaching the Sox. And obviously, the Rays, their stadium situation definitely has to be figured out. I mean, because the White Sox still have a viable stadium in Wright Field. It's just that the new revenue model is you got to be, real estate developers. And again, they could develop those parking lots around Wright Field. So at least it's just, I think it's going to put off that relocation dark cloud for a while. But realignment that comes with it could disrupt some of the current rivalries we enjoy, although maybe you and I actually get the Cubs and the Sox in the same division. And I would say the Cubs and the White Sox rivalry is way hotter, or was way hotter, obviously, 2 decades ago than, say, the Sox and the Royals rivalry has ever been. However, all these proposed realignments that I've seen, not exactly a fan of the 4-team divisions. I mean, it works in football, but I'm not sure it's going to work in baseball, because if the next labor deal doesn't have a salary cap, you got the potential for some really weak division champions getting into the playoffs more so than ever. So actually, I would prefer the 4 8-team divisions like the NHL has. But here's an example of some of the realignment that has been concocted. Fox Sports put this out. This is on MLB at Fox. I got the tweet up. How would MLB's divisions and rivalries shift if the league expanded and realigned? We explored the possibilities. So they have, for example, the NL Midwest, and that's where the White Sox would go. They would be with the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Reds. Okay, so first, my critique, I'll be a traditionalist in the sense of, how can you take a founding member of the American League and throw them over to the National League? Now, again, it's more, national conference, basically. That we're just still, and that's basically what all these have become. American League, National League, they're conferences, okay? The league offices shut down. Everything's run by the MLB commissioner. Everybody's now playing by all the same rules. Second, I'm fine with the Cardinals also being in the same division, but why are you bringing in the Reds when you could pair those 3 teams up with, say, the Guardians, for, at least I'll say selfishly, for a rivalry like what you want to set up with the Cubs and the White Sox? And you already have the White Sox Guardians rivalry. And then on the flip side, why break up the Cubs and Brewers rivalry that's been running good for the past couple of seasons? Now, I can sort of get behind what the Athletic is proposing. So they have, basically, they're shipping out Kansas City, and I've got the graphic up for those watching on YouTube. They're shipping out Kansas City to a division with Houston, Texas, and Colorado, and then they're leaving Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland in the same division. So you're keeping at least 4 AL Central Division rivals together. But imagine an 8-team Central Division of, say, the White Sox, the Cubs, Cardinals, Twins, Brewers, Guardians, Detroit, and Reds. That's something I would love. In the East, you'd have the Yankees, Mets, Red Sox, Phillies, Pirates, Blue Jays, Orioles, and Washington. You could have a South Division of the Braves, Marlins, Rays, Nashville, Houston, Texas, Royals, Rockies. The Rockies are kind of like the stepchilds. It's kind of hard to place them. You could put them in the Central, kind of like what the NHL has done with the Colorado Avalanche. But then you could sacrifice a rivalry there. So, it's kind of like, where do you put the Rockies? And then the West Division, Dodgers, Angels, San Diego, Arizona, Seattle, San Francisco, the Athletics, and that Western expansion team in Utah, Portland. But again, the Rockies and the Royals, they kind of get squeezed. However, a Central Division would be, obviously full of fun series, but with the current state of the White Sox being owned by Jerry, that team is going to be outsmarted by a lot of better front offices in the Nate, conference configuration. But then again, it's not happening until next decade, and Justin Ishbia hopefully will have taken control of the franchise. And by then, he will hopefully is the great owner that we all hope for. Well, speaking of the playoffs, the White Sox and the Twins are not making the postseason this year, and likely they're not making it next year. Let's discuss how feasible, though, it is for the Sox to catch the Twins in the standings next year after the break on Locked On White Sox. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies and making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. And whether you're out on the course or just need that little extra push to power through your day, 5-Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And I know I could have used a 5-Hour Energy Transfusion after walking 18 with my buddy back in the day when we were teenagers. Okay, so we thought we got this great deal to walk 18, not realizing it was a long course. We were dragging on the back nine. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. And the grape ginger lime flavor of 5-Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. And now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip 4-2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Exclusive Masters tournament ends October 31st, 2025. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't, it's just showing YouTube. Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Okay, so the White Sox amazing start to the to the post All-Star break portion of the schedule, and then that Twins trade deadline sell-off had some hopes that, hey, maybe the White Sox can actually catch Minnesota in the standings this year. But it ain't happening. Twins are still 13 games up on the Sox, and the White Sox have obviously dramatically cooled off after that hot stretch to just remain plain out bad. It was fun, but remember, with fun bad, it still means you're bad. Now, that does not mean you and I cannot dare to dream that the Sox could jump the Twins in the standings next year. However, for that to happen, the Twins, I think, have to do more selling off. And even then, they could possibly get some reinforcements quickly as they do have the more highly regarded farm system. And to make sure I don't sound out of town stupid, I did ask the Locked On Twins guys for their thoughts on, hey, could the White Sox catch the Twins in the standings next year? And the co-hosts gave me two different opinions. Hey, co-hosts disagreeing. That's crazy. Hashtag sarcasm. So here's what Dave Brown wrote me when I posed the question to him. It's not so ridiculous that you couldn't do an episode about it. In fact, I encourage you, because if the Twins actually trade Ryan and Lopez this winter, there's a non-zero chance it would open things up for this possibility. Then here's what Brandon Wayne wrote me. Based on talent, I think they should be potentially good next year. Buxton, Keishel, Lewis, Wallner is a decent offensive core, and Lopez and Ryan with some kids is a good rotation. Bullpen is a mess, but they'll work on it. Could happen next year, but I'll say this. I think the Twins are closer than most others do. So obviously you're getting two different dynamics. I hope they actually do an episode on this, because it seems like obviously they've got different opinions on where the Twins going. And I know some Twins fans are definitely depressed that the Polans are going to still own the team. Because once again, you got to give Jerry his due. I know it's hard, but that was such a baller move to get Justin Ishbia to pull his billions of dollars out of potentially buying the Twins and putting it into the White Sox. And then being able to wait 4 more years potentially to take control, and even 9 years potentially. So you got to give Jerry his credit. But does it mean the White Sox are going to catch the Twins? Because in terms of farm system rankings, the Twins are currently the second best farm system according to MLB Pipeline in their latest updated rankings. While the Sox, they're 17th. I've talked about it on a couple of episodes. Every day, as you might recall. Last week's episode with Brad Hafner, we talked about it. From Sox on 35th, he came on the show, and that was one of our topics. And in terms of value, according to Fangraphs, the Twins are way ahead of the White Sox, especially in terms of those 55, 60 grade prospects. They've got a few more than the White Sox. And they got the number 14 prospect overall in Walker Jenkins, and he's set for arrival next year per MLB Pipeline. And he's sort of their version of Brady Montgomery, except he's 20. 8 of their top 30 prospects are already at AAA. 6 of their top 30 prospects, according to MLB Pipeline, are at AA. So for context, the White Sox, in terms of their top 30 prospects, they got 5 at AAA. And a few of them are just going to be nothing more than relievers, like Peyton Pallette and Jairo Iriarte. And one of them, I think the franchise is just not as high on as, say, MLB Pipeline is, and that's Brian Ramos. And then 6 of the White Sox top 30 prospects are at AA. And again, what top 30, and none of that top 30, remember, can vary from within the team. I mean, the internal team rankings could be way different than what Fangraphs has, than what Baseball America has, that what MLB Pipeline has, or Baseball Prospectus. You know, again, pitching director Brian Bannister looks at Shane Murphy very highly. The rest of the scouting services do not. But when you look at these top 30s, and again, the top 30s are more, again, these are these guys that have the potential to get to the big leagues and make a contribution. At least that's how I hope everybody's always ranking it. Or again, what's the potential to be a better, to be a good baseball player. But the Twins do have the better system. Now, the White Sox could improve in the standings if this current core continues to progress and avoid regression. Excuse me one second. Sorry, there, had to hit the cough button. Now, if Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teel, and Edgar Carroll move up the stardom ladder, they continue to be the studs that we're all hoping them to be, you do got to like the team's chances of picking up more wins. And again, if you don't have regression from, say, Chase Mydroth, because we're starting to see, is he the Greek god of walks? Is he an everyday starter? I'll talk about Miguel Vargas in the next segment. And maybe a full off season of Curtis Mead working on maybe building up his body, kind of like what Miguel Vargas did. Maybe that will get him to reach his at least raised floor, that type of stuff. And if you do add in, maybe say a solid veteran starter, I talked about it yesterday. Obviously, Martin Perez wants to come back. I've got no problem with that. But I still think the White Sox have to add 2 starters to the rotation next year. So say you bring back Perez and he pitches solid and stays healthy the entire year, and then you add another solid veteran starter. Okay. And say Shane Smith, don't run out of gas this time. And Sean Burke can figure out his command. With Davis Martin, hey, we're starting to move up a little bit here. And then get some bullpen arms that can actually miss bats and thrive in high leverage. All right. Now we're seeing the White Sox improving their win total. And maybe Braden Montgomery is up midway through the season in 2026. And suddenly he's hitting kind of like Colson. He makes that big impact. So it's possible. That's how I'm going to put it. What I'm going to actually put it at from how I would frame it is, this is the hurdle that the Sox need to clear next year. That is one of the things that we should hold them to. Can you top the Twins in the standings? Can you get to 4th place? I know it's like, oh man, you're settling. This rebuild's still going to take some time. They still have to add some more pieces. And another hurdle, can you just beat your division rivals? I discussed it a few shows back. Last Friday and Monday, the Sox can't win in Kansas City. And they need to close the run differential gap with the Tigers and the Guardians that they've had in head-to-head matchups. But if the Twins do continue to sell off, and the White Sox make that progression that we're all hoping that they do next year, yeah, it's possible. All right, so one player the White Sox will need to get better in 2026 is Miguel Vargas. Although the improvement he's made this year has at least made him a core piece. And according to MLB Network, he ranks 6 on their top 10 most improved players. So let's discuss that after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you're going to have a fun weekend. Mine, kind of at least a nice little Sunday plan. Gonna go to Home Depot. Gonna go look for some indoor, outdoor waterproof carpeting for my basement. Because if it sounds a little echoey here, I'm back, in the basement's, studio settings. I know it's such a stereotype that a podcaster's in his basement, but this is the best spot for me in my living facility. But we had to rip out the carpet after the flooding that happened in my house. So right now, I've got nothing but cement floor and some walls. So yeah, things tend to bounce a little bit. So we're going to go maybe pick out some carpeting on that or figure out what we're going to do with the basement. Hoping to turn it into like a nice man cave, that type of thing. But still got to work on my wife and daughter on that. Well, the swing adjustment Miguel Vargas made in late April probably saved his big league career. Because before that swing adjustment in late April, he was trending towards Bustville. And that swing adjustment also placed him 6th on MLB Network's recent top 10 most improved players. Although one of the reasons it wasn't a very high bar he had to clear to get in the top 10, because they basically cited, he went from a 150, 249, 257 slash line last year between time with the Dodgers and the White Sox. And also, again, when he was traded to the White Sox, there were many times he looked like he was being held prisoner after the trade. But he goes from that terrible slash line to his current 231, 307, 396 slash line. So basically, he had nowhere to go but up. Although it was looking like he could continue to, find rock bottom. He was looking like a terrible hitter again before everything changed at Fenway Park in late April. Because remember, on April 19th, his slash line was 139, 235, 194. He was actually looking worse than he did last year in those 2 months that he played for the Sox in 2024. But then he makes, the hand adjustment of where he's placing his bat to, and he proceeds to go on a tear in May when he had an 899 OPS. And it got to the point where in that Mets series, they're like, we're not pitching to this guy. We're just not. We're going to walk you. There's first base. I think they actually did intentionally walk him like once or twice. But they were like, we don't need to pitch to this guy. He's the only one right now hitting. We're not dealing with it. Now, obviously, he's cooled off since then. A 204 average and a 651 or 661 OPS in June definitely cooled him off and brought him back down to earth. A 220 average in July and a 654 OPS that month too. Clearly still showed that, I guess he's just a raised floor player. Although average-wise, he is starting to heat up again with a 278 batting average in August. You'd like to get the slug back, but hey, if he's going back to the roots of, hey, I just want to make contact and get the ball in play and hit them where they ain't, I'm fine with that. But to me, this is the slash line I want to see consistently from Miguel Vargas, as long as he's with the White Sox. 245, 321, 440. Now, you might be like, man, why don't you have higher standards? Well, that's what he had after playing the Orioles on May 30th. And I think that encapsulates what he could be. A very good raised floor player. And the next White Sox team, and I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. They need still productive, solid 1.5 to 2 F4 players. And I think, again, a 245, 321, 440 slash line, that hits the target. And if he can hit 20 to 25 home runs, even though, again, I think he should be playing first base, and that's probably not the ideal pop you want out of a first baseman, but still, that is very good production for what you would need out of first base. And if you can get that 245, 321, 440 slash line, again, that's a 761 OPS. That's an average OPS, the batting average too, in terms of what relative to what most hitters are having these days. It's average. But again, it's better than, what we've seen out of some of the guys that they've rolled out in the lineup like last year, that's a chance to climb out of the AL Central cellar next year. And he also deserves this recognition because you think about this. He went from a -1 F4 player with a WRC plus of 46 last year to right now he's at a 0.9 F4 player, and he's got a WRC plus of 96. So if he can hit a little bit better, he can at least get to league average. And again, if he can show that he can still play some good defense, again, get that average up a little bit more, you start to tick into that at least 1.5 F4 player. And that's what the White Sox need too. They obviously need superstars. But I think you're going to get that from Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, and Edgar Carroll. And hopefully Braden Montgomery. And hopefully Billy Carlson. Those types of guys. But you want to start to move up in terms of value. Because remember, that's what F4, for those that are like, oh, F4 takes into account their defense too. Well, it takes into account the value of the player and puts it into one nice shiny number for you. And like WRC Plus takes all of the offensive value and puts it into one nice shiny number for you. And he's getting close to being, again, a solid raised floor player that the next good team needs. And you think about this too. He's cut down on his strikeouts, at least strikeout percentage. He was at 24.1 last year. Now he's at 17.1. And the hard hit percentage is way up. 26.3 to 40.8. And you might be like, hey, Todd, last year we kept hearing about you panning that trade and you not liking Miguel Vargas. Well, first, remember, if you go back every day, and everydayers might remember, during the offseason, I was willing to give him a second chance. And now, too, I have come to respect that he's put in the work to get better. And he can still get better. I mean, these numbers are showing ascension. And that's also what I want to see. Continue to ascend. Don't regress. I just think there's, more of a level off. But I would be happy with him being the first baseman during not only this rebuild, but on the next good team. And yeah, I'm giving up on Tim Elko already. And I've had some Elko truthers pop into the comments like, what? Why aren't you mentioning Tim Elko anymore? He just doesn't make contact. He's not going to make contact at the big league level. I'm just not confident that he's going to make contact. I think he's a fine organizational depth piece. I think if you need a guy to come up for 10 days to cover for an injury, I'm fine with that. And yes, he can probably provide some home runs occasionally, but he's looking more, but during that sample size, and I know it's a small sample size, but he was definitely giving off Bobby, Dolbeck and Ryan Noda vibes. I'm just saying. And remember, I was an Elko truther too. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, he can't even, the front office might be right. He's going to be a strikeout machine. And then the few times he will get a hold of it, obviously he's going to hit it a country mile, but he's barely going to get a hold of it. That's why, I think Miguel Vargas at first base, and I've been advocating it because he's actually pretty good defensively there, is where he should be long-term. He's a 3 defensive runs saved right now at first this year and 2 outs above average. And like I said, there's still potential for him to improve that. He could actually climb in the rankings of most improved players. I mean, again, I'm not sure he'll ever be an all-star, but if he can be a solid 1.5 to 2 F4 player on the next good team, well, that's good enough for me. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back on Monday with another weekly Minor League Monday report. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion on how potential expansion and realignment will impact the White Sox, if the Sox can pass the Twins in the standings, and Miguel Vargas being one of the 10 most improved players this season. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Talk to you Monday.